I think in this age, the question that what our identity is and who we are is more relevant and complex than it was ever before. But if you ask me, I think we never really find who we are. We always choose it. We always choose who we want to become. We absorb the events happening in our surrounding, and we consciously choose who we want to follow based on either impulses or rational thinking. Once you have selected who you want to follow, there are two ways you can go about following your idols. Number one, you can put yourself in their shoes. You would like to learn how they tackle their problems. You learn from their experiences. And you think like them and takes the steps that they took to follow the path of success. Or you can do the other thing, that is, put yourself in their shoes. But literally, that is, you go to the market, you buy a pair of khadau, you get a cane, you wrap yourself around in a white cloth, wear a bald cap, and become Gandhiji. Now tell me, who is a bigger fan here? Right? Is he the guy who's following him ideologically, or who is cosplaying him? Right? So that is what cosplay is. If you Google what cosplay means, it basically, the basic definition that you'll get there is cosplay is an activity where you pretend to be and dress up as a character. And that's my business. I never thought it would be. I'm from a very small town, and my family was very orthodox. Like, I was never allowed to wear those rugged, torn jeans, or have spikes, or color those spikes golden. Like, but given my current hair situation, I don't think, like, spikes is my biggest problem right now. But despite all of that, I'm one of the most successful cosplayers in India. I've won multiple cosplay events. I have represented India in Chicago in the World Crown Championship of Cosplay, which is like the World Cup of Cosplay. And I'm probably one of the first people from India, first cosplayers from India who has won in a major international cosplay competition. Which tells you two things. Number one, I'm a bit of a show-off, okay? And number two, that cosplay is for everyone. It doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are, what ethnicity you are, or you can choose whoever you want to be. You could be a 10-year-old who wants to cosplay Hannibal Lecter, or you could be a 50-year-old woman who wants to cosplay Darth Vader. So there I was, this confused kid, being pressurized to figure out who I was. One day, I'm watching WWE and I wanted to be like Rock. Who doesn't love Rock, right? The next day, I open the newspaper and see a picture of Nelson Mandela being kissed by Charlize Theron, and suddenly I want to win a Nobel Peace Prize. But then, this guy came into my life. You remember him, right? Everyone loved him. Everyone respected him. And you know what his best power was? He would go around guilt-tripping everyone in the Mumbai, okay? And he'd be like, "Tehro." And people would be like, "Sorry, Shaktiman." Has it ever happened to you? Like, have you ever walked up to a person and pointed out their mistake, and they have just accepted it and said sorry? It's the best feeling ever. Right? And not just that, this guy told me that even a simpleton, okay, spoiler alert, Gangadhar can be Shaktiman. Okay? So, I really loved him. I wanted to be him. So I decided, next time when there's a fancy dress competition in my school, I'm going to ask my parents for a Shaktiman costume. Obviously, they declined. So I just did the best next thing. I found a jacket in my house, wore the coolest shades that I can find, and went to the school and shouted around, "If you smell what the Rock is cooking." But then there was this kid whose parents did buy him a Shaktiman costume, and he won. But it's okay. I had gotten my first taste of cosplay, and it just started there. Now, by the time I had graduated from school, legendary animes like Dragon Ball Z and Batman the Animated Series had launched. And everyone wanted to be either him or Goku, right? But you have to remember that this was starting of the new millennium. I'm very old. So it's the starting of the new millennium. And we still were stuck with dial-up connections, which were only useful for downloading Winamp or Windows Media Player skins, or making PowerPoint presentations on 7 wonders of the world. So we had no clue what the fandom scene was outside, like if there were fandom groups, and how big comics were outside India, or even in our own country. But then, X-Men came out. Before X-Men, the superhero movies were not taken seriously. They were rather a bit ridiculous, if you remember Batman and Robin. Okay, so yeah, the costumes that were there, that you were used to seeing, were either very cartoonish, or not very inspiring, or too complex for a small kid to fathom. But X-Men, this movie changed my life. I mean, look at these guys. There's this guy who has claws in his hands, and there's this guy who shoots laser from his eyes, and there's this guy who controls metal, right? And it's not just their costumes, it's not just their powers that were fascinating to me. It was their costumes, because costumes were functional and simple, and something a 14-year-old could comprehend. Like, these guys were covered in fine Italian leather from head to toe, like boots, gloves, bodysuits, and everything. And Mystique didn't even need any of that, right? All she needed was a killer personality, right? So 2 years later, Spider-Man released, and then Hellboy, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Batman Begins, and then Iron Man, and everything changed. Everything changed. The movie industry, the world as we know, had changed at this point, because we had entered the era of Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, around this time, I had finally shifted to Delhi. I was in a metro city, I had better connectivity, I had a better internet, and so I finally discovered cosplay. Now, I had a name for the secret hobby or interest that I used to have. I call it secret because I still wasn't sure if I wanted to tell my friends that I have, tendencies of dressing up as a character and masquerading in public. I didn't know how they would take it. So yeah, but in the 3rd year of my college, the first Indian Comic Con was announced. And I was super excited and nervous, because I didn't want to miss this opportunity. No matter what, I wanted to cosplay. And I had seen enough cosplay pictures on the internet by that time, but I had no clue how to make a costume. I had no idea how to sew, and my crafting abilities were confirmed to a paper plane or tippy top, which color you want. Okay, so yeah, so I decided, okay, this time I need to make something which is more accessible, which is something simple. I can pull it off without having to build too much on my own. I can resource the stuff. So I chose Rorschach. Now, if you don't know who Rorschach is, you are missing out. There's a series called Watchmen. You should definitely read it or watch the movie. They're amazing. Yeah, so Rorschach was this amazing, brooding, detective kind of a guy, and I loved him. And the best thing was that he was very easy to make. Like, all I need to do was I needed to go to Palika Bazaar. I got my overcoat, I got a stole, I got a hat, and I got a lady's stocking that I put on my face. So the only things I needed to craft here was the mask, where I drew the ink blots, and the smiley. And this is what I made. And I did ask a few of my friends if they wanted to cosplay with me, but obviously they all thought it was a very stupid idea. So there I was. The day of the Comic-Con was here, and I reached the venue. I was so excited. I reached the venue at 10 a.m. in the morning, as soon as the gates were opening. And I entered, and I freaked out, because from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. that day, there was not a single other cosplayer. And I was the only one there who was in a complete costume. I was getting a lot of attention, okay, because I was the only person there, but I was afraid that while I was in this dilemma, and I was wondering if should I leave or like change into like normal clothes, 2 more cosplayers arrived, and then 2 more. And then by the end of the day, there were 8 cosplayers in the con. These 8 are probably the first cosplayers in a Comic-Con in India. So I'm not counting the kids, okay? They bought their costumes. Anyways, I'm just joking. So yeah, so these 8 we were 8 people strong. And to put this in retrospective, the average number of people attending, the cosplayers attending a comic convention in India last year was 300. So there were like 300 cosplayers every day, and this was like 8 people. So over the years, I did something special and something new. And those people are still my friends because we were part of a new revolution. That's what we felt at the time. Over the years, my costume started becoming more and more complex. Freddy Krueger, I won a competition as Spawn, I did Judge Dredd, and all these kinds of complex characters. We didn't realize that sometimes cosplay feels like a ridiculous activity. Okay, I mean, we know that we are dressing up and going to the con and acting weirdly, but you know what else is ridiculous? Having a snake for a pet, free soloing, demolition derby, and Takeshi's castle, right? You're telling me that the tendency to put yourself in a position where you might get embarrassed or physically hurt is not ridiculous, but we still love the show. We loved Javed Jaffrey, we loved Charlie Chaplin, we loved Mr. Bean, and we love roadies, right? So there are a lot of ridiculous things that we like in our lives, and cosplay is no different. After a few years, I came to know that the new Star Wars movie is releasing. Now, this was the 7th movie that was releasing after the 3rd one, right? So they are really screwing up our maths there. So yeah, and this movie was releasing just a few days before the Comic-Con. And I was super excited. I was like, yes, I always wanted to cosplay something from Star Wars, and this was my opportunity. So I decided to cosplay Chewbacca. Now, honestly, Chewbacca wasn't my favorite character at that point from Star Wars, but he was fun, and I loved being a goof on the show. With Chewbacca, I can just run around the con, make weird noises and act all eccentric, but that's how Chewbacca was. Now, I finished my costume before the movie was released. So now the movie was released, and I went to watch it. And for some reason, you haven't still seen that movie. Spoiler alert, here you can close your ears. Han Solo dies. Han Solo, who happened to be Chewie's best friend and one of the coolest guy in the galaxy, he dies a very tragic death in the movie. His own son stabbed him. And it really changed everything. I mean, I didn't know what to do. 2 days later, I was at the con, but I was confused because I wasn't feeling like that goof anymore. That was not my plan. But it was not just because I was feeling weird that Han Solo had died and Chewie would be sad. I was also sad because when I said Chewie wasn't my favorite character, Han Solo was. Han Solo was the one I loved, and he was such an iconic character that I was not able to understand how to react to that situation. So I was still on the con. I was ready in my costume, but I was fidgeting around wondering what I should do. And this was my cosplay. So while still in the dilemma, someone ran up to me and they hugged me. And it was not like a formal hug, They really squeezed me, in there. And I was like, okay. And then this guy, they faced me. After a few short seconds of hugging me, they faced me and they said, I'm sorry. I can't believe he's dead. And we are all miss him so much. And I hugged him back. And then I knew what I needed to do. I just needed to be there. Because like me and Chewie, all these fans of Star Wars and Han Solo were growing through the same emotion. We were all feeling grief, and we all needed closure. And that hug that person gave me wasn't just for Chewbacca, that was also for me, because I felt relieved. So over the next 5 or 6 hours on the con, I broke all kinds of Limca records of hugging, okay? And Chewie went on to become my most famous cosplay. Like, people still request me to cosplay Chewbacca. And over time, Chewbacca also became my favorite character. I mean, Han Solo was dead anyway, so yeah. So yeah, after Chewbacca really changed my life. Not just for cosplay, but also personally. after I did Chewbacca, a lot of people started noticing me. I mean, there were a lot of my friends or the people that I know who didn't know about Star Wars, and after watching my Chewbacca cosplay, they became a fan of Star Wars. And there were a lot of people who were fans of Star Wars, and they didn't know about me. And they checked me out, and they became my fans, you know? So, so a lot of people started contacting me to make all kinds of weird things. Not weird things, sorry. Cosplay-related things, okay. So, and at that point, I was a photographer in Mumbai, and I was doing well for myself. And cosplay was at a very nascent stage, and I didn't think it was a very viable source of primary income. So I refused for the first few times, but after a lot of deliberation, I thought I'd like to give it a go, just to see, because still, like, the requests were coming in, and I was like, okay, fine, let's see how it goes. So next year, I left my job and completely focused on building things and doing cosplay, with the goal of the Crown Championships of Cosplay as my primary aim. That was a very difficult year. I mean, working as a freelancer is difficult as on itself, but working as a freelancer in a field which is virtually non-existent is a real test of character. And but what they say is true. Like, if you do what you love, it doesn't feel like work. So I was like, cool, I understand that this part is difficult, but if somehow I pull together and manage to go through this, and somehow if I am able to make this a viable career choice, I'll be sorted for life. I'll be doing what I love. So I kept at it, and even after a lot of hardships that year, I finally made it through, and I won the championship in India and got my ticket to go to Chicago. That was me in Chicago, among some of the best cosplayers in the world. And this trip changed me. I was in a foreign country among the best cosplayers in the world, and when I interacted with them, I realized the true potential of this. The cosplayers over there are social media influencers. They are professionals, like, not just cosplay, they make things for movies and shows and all kinds of things. And they are respected artists. And this really changed my perception of cosplay. And it was the final thing that I needed to take a leap of faith. After coming back to India, I told my experiences to other cosplayers. I took as many workshops as I can. I did a lot of talks in colleges. I wanted to promote cosplay as in any way I can. So I opened up my own studio, and I collaborated with a lot of cosplayers in making things that at one point seemed impossible, but were now possible because we were collectively doing it. So as a community, we pushed to bring ourselves into the mainstream, and it worked. Over the last few years, the number of cosplayers and the cosplay-related events, game launches, and all these things have increased drastically. Companies have started realizing the potential of hiring a cosplayer and the strong attraction it brings in comparison to any other crowd-pulling activity. So we were getting constant work. More and more cosplayers were taking up cosplay as a viable source of income. We were finally getting the love and respect that we had been craving for so long. So yes, ever since then, I have been making more and more cosplays, collaborating with more and more people, and my work has been getting more and more expansive. Now I don't just make cosplays, I make installation arts, I make props for display and movies and shows, and a lot of other things. And we have come a far way from where we started. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, we still have barriers that we want to break. There are still taboos and misconceptions that we need to fight. I'm still that confused kid, you know, still jumping from shoes to shoes of different characters, figuring out who I am. But I think I've started finding more joy in the process of finding myself than in the ultimate goal. And I don't think I can still say very conclusively who I am, because there are a lot of characters I still want to cosplay. I mean, I haven't still cosplayed Joker. You can't really know yourself until you have cosplayed Joker, right? So that's it. But we are not alone now. We are not that small minority that we used to be at one point. The number of cosplayers is growing exponentially. And now, we are an army. And we are an army you would want on your side, because we'll have better looking armors, and we'll definitely have a lot of Hulks. Thank you.